I am Audrey Bennett, 34 years old. I used to believe that family was something you could never lose, only endure, until you were accepted again. But then a white newborn onesie swayed on the clothesline untouched. The phone lit up Mom calling. No one explained, no one spoke, and I understood peace isn't something others grant you. It's what you choose to keep quietly for yourself. I never quite knew what to do when my absence became too quiet for anyone to notice. The post had been up for 8 hours before I saw it. My phone had sat face down on the kitchen counter while I napped on the couch, one hand resting on my stomach. When I finally picked it up, the screen blinked at 12% battery, a smudge of peanut butter across the corner from breakfast. I wiped it with my sleeve, then opened Facebook to check a recipe someone had sent. The image loaded slowly. It was a group photo, Mom, Amber, and Aunt Judith in front of our childhood porch. Balloons in soft pink and pale yellow tied behind them, a table set with folded napkins and mini cupcakes. Amber's hand sat delicately on her belly, her dress pressed flat like a magazine spread. The caption read, "Family brunch this Saturday. So excited for our girls to celebrate together." There was a heart emoji. Pink, not red. I didn't remember receiving an invitation. I searched my messages. Mom's last text had been 3 days ago, a forwarded coupon for nursing bras, and the words might help. Amber hadn't texted in over a week. My email inbox had one automated birthday greeting from an old shampoo subscription and a shipping notice for prenatal vitamins. No calendar invites, no call log. I checked the family group chat. The last entry was from Dad. "Amber says the baby's craving garlic knots. Bring extra." 7 thumbs up emojis followed. None were mine. I stared at the photo again. Amber's bump looked fuller than I remembered. Or maybe it was the dress. Or the way Mom angled her shoulders toward her like the focal point had shifted. I dialed. 6 rings. Then her voice. "You're 6 months pregnant. You should be resting." I waited. The silence wasn't heavy. It didn't hang. It just floated, untouched. It's just a casual thing. Amber's friends wanted to do something for her. It's not that big of a deal. There was laughter in the background, silverware against ceramic. A woman's voice, Rachel's maybe mentioning baby names. The line disconnected without a goodbye. I called Amber, straight to voicemail. 1 hour later, she sent a text, "Better you skip." 3 words. No punctuation, no emoji. I didn't respond. The air inside the house had cooled while I wasn't paying attention. A draft came in from somewhere I wasn't sure where. I stood close the window above the sink and returned to the kitchen table where my mug had left a wet ring on the wood. The condensation had pooled slightly to one side, forming a lopsided oval. I used the hem of my sleeve to wipe it up. The fabric soaked it slowly, like it didn't really want the task. Inside the top drawer near the fridge, I kept what I called the box of real things, a fabric-bound notebook, 4 ultrasound printouts, one from each appointment, a list of possible names written in pencil, a pacifier I bought too early. The pages of the notebook were slightly curled at the edges, and one corner bore the faint outline of a tear that never quite dropped. Each ultrasound was tied with a soft beige ribbon. I had chosen that color on purpose. It didn't imply anything. Not pink, not blue, not festive, just quiet. Lately I wondered if that had been a mistake. Maybe beige had said nothing too well. Amber posted daily now. Quotes about motherhood layered over filtered images of her hand on her stomach, morning light, coming in just so from the right. Same angle I had used in my first announcement post, back when I still shared updates. She never commented on mine, never asked about my symptoms or if the backaches were worse when I slept on the left. She didn't ask about the vitamins, the brand of body oil, the twitching in my lower abdomen that started around week 22, but she reposted the same link I once shared about fetal movement and captioned it, "Magic." Right? I closed the drawer. There was a time when I believed proximity meant connection, that if you shared blood and furniture and last names, things would sort themselves out. But I'd sat through too many dinners where the mashed potatoes stayed full on my side of the table, where someone spoke over me to talk about Amber's new hairstyle, or her new plan to become a doula, or how radiant she looked in sage green. She always looks radiant in sage green. I stopped wearing it 3 years ago. There's a wooden sign above Mom's fireplace that reads, "Family means no one gets left behind." Last December, I noticed the "no" had peeled slightly. From certain angles, it looked like family means one gets left behind. I thought about fixing it, but maybe it didn't need fixing. Last Thanksgiving, Amber sat under that sign and told us about Brian. He listens like nobody else. Mom touched her wrist and said, "He really sees you." I passed the stuffing. No one took it. The napkin I used that evening had a wine stain the shape of a crescent moon. I folded it neatly before placing it on my empty plate. It left an imprint on the ceramic that took 2 washes to disappear. I didn't tell anyone about the imprint, but I noticed that no one asked me what I was thankful for. Tonight, I opened my notebook to the last page I'd written on. The date was from 2 weeks ago. I hadn't meant to stop writing. I just ran out of ways to phrase absence. I folded that page back into the binding, then turned to a fresh one and drew a single straight line left to right. I didn't label it. Didn't explain. I knew what it meant. I opened my freezer and took out the bag of peas I'd meant to use in a stir-fry. I pressed it against my lower back, then sat at the edge of the bed without turning on the light. I watched the blinking notification on my phone pulse against the nightstand wood. 3 blinks. Then stillness. Some things you only remember because you kept them quiet the first time. When I made the volleyball team in 8th grade, I came home and left the permission slip, unsigned, on the kitchen counter. Amber picked it up before Mom got home. Her eyes scanned it twice. She didn't speak, just held it in her hand like something delicate, stolen. That evening, she told Mom she might try out too. She'd never mentioned volleyball before. I let her borrow my knee pads, the ones with the faded blue stitching that never really fit her. Amber didn't make the team. I pretended I forgot tryouts were that day. I skipped dinner and finished my homework in the laundry room. The acceptance letter to Dartmouth arrived 2 days after Amber's second college rejection. I remember how the envelope looked beside hers on the hallway table. Mine was thick, textured, her envelope thin, like something meant to disappear between catalogues. I read mine in the garage. That night at dinner, Mom kept her voice even. "Let's not make tonight about comparisons." No one had said a word. I didn't hang the acceptance letter on the fridge. I folded it in half and kept it inside a library book until the due date passed. I think it was the bell jar. I never finished it. When Amber broke up with her second fiancé, Mom cried in the car. She said Amber just needs to feel like she's still part of something. That Christmas, I didn't bring my boyfriend home, even though we were still together then. I told everyone we were figuring things out. He wasn't. Years later, when we broke up for real, Amber texted me a screenshot of a quote, "Everything happens for a reason, especially endings." I didn't respond. I deleted the message, but I remember the font. It was one of those cursive styles people used on wedding invitations. When I got the Employee Recognition Award at the hospital, the one where they frame your name and the mayor shakes your hand, I didn't bring the plaque home. Amber had once told me that my job is all band-aids and checklists anyway. I knew Mom would say, "You know, she's always been more sensitive." I left the plaque on a shelf behind my desk. A few weeks later, the janitor knocked it over while dusting. The glass cracked across my name. I never replaced the frame. I taped the edges with surgical tape and filed it in a drawer behind patient files. It's probably still there. There was a man I loved once. His name was Daniel. He had dark eyes and a way of speaking slowly, like he thought every sentence should be permanent. Amber messaged him after our first real argument. I didn't know until he showed me. The message was short. Just his name, a comma, and if you ever want something quieter. He never replied to her, but I told him we should take time apart. I used the phrase emotional recalibration. He didn't know what to do with that. He packed a week later. I returned his toothbrush to the guest drawer, the one with the mismatched socks and expired eye drops. Amber never brought it up. Neither did I. When I found out I was pregnant, I waited 2 weeks before telling anyone. Not out of secrecy, just preservation. I taped the test result to the back of the medicine cabinet mirror. I looked at it when brushing my teeth and said nothing. Mom cried when she found out. She called it God's timing. Amber stayed quiet for 3 days, then showed up with prenatal tea and a list of podcasts. She sat on my couch with her shoes on and talked about pelvic floor therapy as if we were colleagues in the same program. I brought her to my OB appointment once. Just once. She complimented the artwork in the waiting room and asked about the brand of scale they used. At the end of the visit, she waited for me to put the ultrasound photo in my purse, then asked if she could take a picture of it just to show Brian how cute the little bean looks. I let her. After that, she began texting questions. What prenatal she should take, what stretch mark cream I liked, if I was planning on using lavender oil or eucalyptus for labor. I gave her my extra bottle of vitamins. She left with it like it was a gift bag from a party. 1 week she asked about birth plans. The next she mentioned how fun it would be if we ended up giving birth on the same day. I laughed. It sounded like something you'd say when nothing was real yet. I took her to see the hospital's labor wing. She brought a small notebook and jotted things down. She said she liked how the curtains in room 4 caught the light in the afternoon. I didn't ask what she was writing. She stopped by the next day with a swaddle blanket. It was the same shade of grey as the one I had bought. She held it up and said, "I just love this tone. So neutral, that word again." I told her I was tired. She left without finishing her tea. That night, I opened the drawer beside my bed, the one with the important things. There was a photograph from the 20-week scan printed on thick paper, a foot perfectly defined, toes still fused in that early curve. I had always looked at that photo with a kind of awe, not reverence, not sentimentality. Just the quiet recognition of a world that was both mine and not mine. This time when I looked, I didn't feel anything. I turned it over. On the back, a faint crease down the center, where the tech had folded it, then smoothed it out again. The paper hadn't forgotten. Neither had I. Some memories don't fade, they get buried under moments that seem too small to defend. When I turned 10, Mom gave me a silver bracelet with the initials A.B. engraved on the inside. It was a delicate chain, thinner than the ones I saw at Claire's, the kind that snagged if you moved too fast. She handed it to me wrapped in floral tissue paper. No box. Amber will love this, she said, her voice rising the way it did when she was excited. Then she caught herself. I mean, Audrey. Audrey will like it too, right? She reached to fasten it on my wrist, but it hung too loose. I nodded. She smiled. The photo from that birthday still sits on her piano. I'm holding the bracelet up for the camera. You can't see my face. Clearly, my hand blocks most of it. The clasp broke 3 months later. I put it in an old coin purse I kept in my desk drawer. I never asked to have it repaired. I wasn't sure who it was meant for. At my wedding, the toast came just after the first dance. My stepfather stood beside the cake table, a champagne flute in his hand, and a folded napkin tucked into his cuff, like a placeholder for something forgotten. We're all so thrilled for Audrey, he said, raising his glass. But I have to admit, I'm even more excited to see Amber find her forever person someday. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough for people to glance at each other. Enough for me to hear the fork in Rachel's hand clink softly against her plate. I smiled. The photographer captured it, me holding my bouquet just below my ribs, grinning like it was a joke I was in on. I never mentioned it to Michael. That night, I folded the napkin with the wine stain from the reception into a small square and slipped it behind the mirror in my vanity. It stayed there until we moved. When I told my family I was pregnant, I didn't make a big announcement. I just mentioned it during a quiet moment on a video call between updates about the weather and a new sofa Mom had ordered. She blinked once, twice. Let's hope Amber has good news soon too, she said. Wouldn't it be perfect if you both had babies at the same time I waited? She asked if I had picked a hospital yet. She didn't ask how I felt. The call ended shortly after with a reminder to send measurements for the baby shower invitation. I wasn't sure which baby the shower was for. The next day I went back and watched the recording of the call. I don't know why I'd saved it. There was a moment where I leaned toward the camera expecting something. My mouth opened slightly. Then I blinked. Just once. The screen froze on that frame when I paused it. I kept it up for 2 hours while I folded baby clothes. Last Christmas, the holiday card came in a red envelope with gold trim. The paper was textured heavier than usual. Mom always liked cards that felt important. The return label read, "The Graysons." Inside, happy holidays from Elaine, Amber, and Dad. No room for error. No accidental omission. No comma left hanging. I turned the card over. Blank. I slipped it into the bookshelf behind the 3rd volume of the World Atlas set. I didn't recycle it. I didn't display it, either. When we were young, Amber used to keep her fingernails painted in shades of blue, navy sapphire, sometimes a soft powder tone that chipped within hours. She would always take mine and repaint them to match. Once she clipped my thumbnail too short, and it bled. She gave me her last Hello Kitty bandage and told me to stop crying. I wasn't crying. That detail stayed with me. Not the blood, not the pain, just the way the bandage felt cold when she pressed it on. I used to think sharing meant becoming. I let her wear my sweaters, my perfume, my phrases. When she started using the phrase holding space in her captions, I didn't mention that it had come from a book I had underlined a year earlier. She once borrowed it and never returned it. I don't think she finished it, but the phrase stuck. Sometimes I hear her voice when I scroll through my own photos. Not the actual sound, just the shape of her comments. She never posts anymore, just stories, brief and vanishing. I think that suits her. The baby dress I bought last month came with a small tag sewn inside the collar, "Made for you." The stitching was uneven. One letter hung lower than the others. I kept it anyway, Amber had once borrowed a sweater from me, light grey cotton blend a little loose at the cuffs. When she returned it, she folded it the wrong way. I remember thinking, you can wear someone's clothes and still never learn how they hold them. A few nights ago, I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway. The dress I wore stretched gently over my stomach. There was a loose seam under the left arm where the fabric had thinned from too many washes. I had sewn it back by hand, the stitches uneven but firm. The thread didn't quite match, slightly off in tone, almost a whisper. Too pale. No one noticed. I did. I ran my hand down the side of the dress, fingers tracing the repair. The baby shifted, a slow, subtle roll, like someone moving in their sleep. I didn't speak. The hallway light above flickered once, then stilled. I didn't replace the bulb. It was enough to see. Some silences arrive not from peace, but from the collapse of language itself. I had opened the memory box only because I needed to feel close to something that still belonged entirely to me. It was a cardboard cube, the kind with metal corners, tucked under the bed, beside a bag of folded muslin blankets. Inside, the contents hadn't changed except they had. The cream ribbon that had once been tied around the ultrasound printouts was loose now, its bow undone. I touched it, as if expecting warmth, but it felt cool and soft, like something handled too many times by hands that didn't care for softness. The note from the OB was still there. So was the printout from week 12 and the hospital wristband they'd cut off after the scare in my second trimester. But the 3D image, the one taken at exactly 20 weeks, the one where the contours of her nose, her chin, even her clenched fist had formed clear as bone, that one was missing. I checked twice, then again. The envelope I had labeled, "Keep this one safe," lay empty, its flap bent backward like a mouth half open. I ran my finger along the inside seam. No tear. No clue of where it had gone. I thought of Amber. She had visited last Tuesday. She brought cupcakes and said the bakery had been running a buy one get one. One box had frosting slightly smudged, like it had been jolted during a quick stop. She'd come alone. No Brian, no real conversation. She had asked to use the bathroom. I remember hearing her voice in the hallway after. Not a full sentence, just her saying, "Oh." Soft and distracted, I didn't connect it then. The phone rang mid-afternoon. Rachel. We hadn't spoken in months. Her voice came through bright like sunlight through blinds I hadn't meant to open. "So wild, you and Amber both expecting little girls. Your mom must be over the moon." I just saw her post. I sat still. My hands hovered above the laundry I had been folding, tiny socks, a onesie with clouds printed across the chest. I didn't reply. Rachel kept talking, her tone chipper. "The ultrasound photo was so clear. Your niece is going to be beautiful." Amber said. "August. That's so close to your due date, right?" I hung up after 3 more words. I don't remember what they were. I opened the Instagram app. I hadn't used it in weeks. My profile photo was still from last year, taken in a parking lot, sunglasses pushed up, belly barely visible then. Amber's latest post was less than an hour old. The picture, my missing ultrasound. It filled the screen, cropped slightly to cut off the corner where the timestamp had been. But it was unmistakable. The angle, the shading, even the faint mark from when I'd accidentally touched it with a tea-stained finger while rearranging the frame on my nightstand. Baby girl Grayson due in August. A true miracle. So grateful. She'd tagged Brian. His profile was public, a man I didn't know. His bio mentioned real estate and weekend hikes. He had posted a photo of them together 2 days ago. Amber in a cream sweater, hand over her belly, captioned blessed. There was no mention of me, not in the comments, not in the thread. My mother had commented a row of pink hearts. I saved the post, not out of habit, but because it felt like proof that something had torn. I didn't text her. I didn't call. My hand reached for my belly slowly, as if checking whether what I carried was still real. I looked around the room. The rocking chair in the corner still had the price tag looped around its arm. The curtains fluttered slightly with the draft I hadn't noticed before. The dresser drawer, half open, revealed a stack of burp cloths with a whale pattern each folded with corners aligned. My phone screen dimmed. I tapped it once, then let it go dark again. I wondered how many people had liked the photo already. How many had sent their congratulations? I imagined my name never being mentioned, my voice never being quoted, my story quietly transferred into someone else's mouth, someone else's home. Amber had always known how to wear things that didn't belong to her. A coat I'd left behind, a phrase I'd used first, a story I once told about a scar on my knee that she later claimed as her own during a sleepover with friends. But this was different. This wasn't hers to carry. I stood beside the memory box ribbon still in my hand. The knot I'd once tied had left a faint crease down its center. I pressed it flat between my fingers and imagined the weight of her decision, how it must have felt, light in her palm, like picking up a hairpin and pocketing it before a mirror noticed. I thought of what it meant to be erased so casually, not through silence, but substitution. My daughter's face had been shared with strangers under a different name, her tiny features used as an accessory in a performance I hadn't been invited to. I didn't cry. I folded the ribbon once then, again, until it became a small square and slipped it into the empty envelope marked, "Keep this one safe." My breath felt separate from me, like something I was borrowing. The baby shifted again, a quiet nudge against my ribs. Not sudden, not sharp, just presence. I closed the bichouk. I placed it back under the bed, aligning it so the edge met the wall perfectly. I didn't reopen the app. I didn't forward the post. I didn't correct the story. Some withdrawals don't make a sound, but they echo. The corner of the bookshelf held a dust line, the shape of a frame that had been there too long. I lifted it gently, almost apologetically, and flipped it over. Amber's photo faced the wall now. Her smile in that picture had always looked just a little rehearsed, like a note struck slightly sharp. I slid it into a drawer, shut it without noise. In its place, I rested the weak 24 Ultrasound, blurry, low contrast, but the small, clenched hand was clear. I didn't frame it, just leaned it there as if asking nothing. My phone screen stayed black. No notifications. I had disabled the calendar reminder for shared pregnancy journal. Amber. The shared document was gone. I deleted it first thing that morning. The email thread we had used since the beginning, archived not out of rage but necessity. I didn't tell her. I didn't send a single line to explain. In the hallway mirror, I checked the clasp of the old silver chain around my neck. It used to carry the charm marked AB, our initials, or maybe just hers. I'd filed it off with a nail buffer the night before. Now it was smooth metal, faceless, still warm against my collarbone. It felt like closure in the shape of quiet. Elaine called in the afternoon. I recognized her tone before I recognized her voice, tight-clipped, polished concern. Amber's been fragile lately. She's working through a lot. A pause, thin and deliberate. We all think a joint shower would help. You're both carrying girls. It could be healing. I didn't clear my throat. I can't. Silence on her end was never empty. It was tactical. Well, if you're going to make it uncomfortable. The call ended with the kind of click that doesn't need emphasis. I stared at the phone for a moment, then turned it over screen down. Later that evening, Michael stood in the doorway holding a tea towel, his hand damp from the dishwater. "We should talk to them," he said. "You shouldn't have to carry this alone." I folded the towel in half, then in quarters. If it still needs explaining, I said then it was never seen in the first place. He didn't answer. He only placed his hand on the back of the chair beside me, fingers lightly curled as if anchoring me without restraint. In the bedroom, I opened the bottom drawer of the wardrobe. Inside, the box of maternity keepsakes had been moved. I had asked him to take it to his office across town, a place I knew Amber had never seen, never touched. It wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about protecting something sacred from fingerprints. I removed one item from the drawer instead, a yellow notepad from the first OB appointment. The top page had a coffee stain in the corner, a shape like a question mark that had bled too wide. I tore it out. Beneath it, a second page. On it, in my handwriting, August 3rd. She's real. She was. She is. That night, I boiled water in the smallest pot I had, the one with the dent on the side from when we moved in. I didn't drink the tea. I only wanted to hear the sound, the quiet bubble rising into steam. It filled the silence just enough. I didn't block anyone. I didn't erase contacts. I simply didn't respond. Amber posted a story the next morning, photos of pink onesies, a faux hand-knit hat, and a tag. Baby Matthews. It scrolled past without resistance. No one knew the face on that ultrasound belonged elsewhere. To someone untagged, unnamed, untouched by the digital glow. At the base of the stairs, there was a coat rack with two hooks. One held my navy maternity cardigan softened from wear. The other had once held hers left behind one evening after brunch. I folded it now, smooth and flat, and placed it in a paper bag. No note. I drove it to the donation center across town, not out of spite, but as a kind of quiet accounting. When I returned, Michael had lit a candle in the kitchen, the kind with no scent, just wax and wick. It flickered without commentary. He handed me a folded cloth napkin. "Do you want to?" I shook my head. "I've already done what I needed to." He set the napkin down without unfolding it. It stayed there all evening, like a question no one needed to ask. Before bed, I slid open the jewelry drawer again. Inside the ring I used to wear on my index finger, gold, slightly warped from years of absent-minded pressure. I slipped it on my right hand instead. It didn't fit as it used to. I let it stay crooked. No one noticed when I stopped logging into the family app. No one commented when I removed myself from the Grayson Girls group chat. If they did, they didn't do it where I could see. That silence became a kind of safety. The frame on the shelf still held the unframed image. I hadn't moved it. Some truths do not need to be hung. They only need to remain. Some silences don't follow pain. They follow clarity. The window in the spare room had no curtain when I started, just blinds that clacked too loudly in the wind. I replaced them with white linen panels slightly sheer. When the sun touched them, they looked like milk poured over light. The room smelled of paper and sanded wood. Michael had helped install the shelf, but I filled it myself, tiny hand-painted animal prints in wooden frames, soft yellow books, and a small plush elephant that still had its tag. I didn't buy a crib yet, just a folded blanket in the corner and a quiet intention. The rug was off-center, frayed at one edge. I didn't fix it. There was something honest about things that didn't align perfectly anymore. I stayed in that room longer than I intended, sometimes with a mug of warm water, not tea, sometimes with the box of prenatal records unopened beside me. Most of the time I brought nothing, just myself, sitting on the edge of an old ottoman we never used, listening to the hum of the refrigerator through the wall. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt unburdened, like a balloon snipped loose, not falling, not rising, just moving without being held. I emailed Delavine from a new address. I removed the shared calendar from her system, requested private scheduling. Please ensure my chart is confidential. I won't be bringing anyone with me. No greeting, no closing. The reply came the next day. Brief, professional, understood. I changed the appointment to a Tuesday. No one knew. That was the point. On Thursday, I walked into a boutique on Willow Street. Not one of the big stores, just a small shop with handmade mobiles, knitted socks, and a shelf of second-hand books with dog-eared covers. In the corner, a woman sat with a basket of yarn in her lap. Her fingers moved without urgency, shaping loops like muscle memory. She glanced at me once. Everyone thinks you love them the second you see them, she said, more to the yarn than to me. But sometimes it takes time. You meet your child and realize you have to learn how to meet yourself, too. I didn't answer. She didn't wait for one. I bought a music box from the top shelf. It was scratched on one side and played only half a melody, a slightly flat on the final note. The clerk wrapped it in brown paper without asking if it was a gift. At home, I placed it near the window in the spare room. When I wound it, the song stuttered once, then continued. Not pretty, not broken, just real. The next morning, I poured milk into a glass I never used. It had a crack that hadn't split, held together by tension and luck. I drank slowly, watching the crack catch the light. It reminded me of something Elaine once told Amber after she broke a bowl. Well, it wasn't heirloom. No point crying over cheap porcelain. I hadn't been in the room, but I'd heard it through the hallway. The kind of line that doesn't bruise it, erases. I thought about the ultrasound photo Amber posted, the one that wasn't hers. I no longer checked the comments. I no longer needed to. I folded laundry on the dining table. One onesie, one cardigan, a set of soft towels someone had sent anonymously. Probably a neighbor. There was no note. I found a ribbon tucked into the envelope, a pale blue one, not pink. A mistake, maybe. Or not. The next appointment came quietly. I drove alone, parked 2 blocks away, walked slowly. In the waiting room, a woman flipped through a magazine, resting it on her belly. I didn't sit near her. I chose a plastic chair by the water dispenser. Dr. Levine didn't mention the change. She only nodded once, pressed gently on my side, measured with calm hands. The screen showed the outline of a shoulder, an ear, a flicker I no longer needed proof of. I drove back with the radio off, not in mourning, in stillness. Michael was home when I returned. He stood in the kitchen holding a mixing bowl. The batter looked too thin, but he kept stirring. He didn't ask anything, just looked at me once. I touched his arm lightly, then walked into the spare room. The curtains swayed. The elephant had tipped over. I righted it. In the top drawer of the changing table, I placed the brown paper package. I didn't unwrap it. The cracked glass, the lopsided rug, the unscented candle, the frayed napkin from last week's dinner, all of it remained where it was. Unfixed. Witnesses. I sat on the ottoman and let the weight shift beneath me. The music box clicked as it stopped. Some things don't need to be played again. They only need to be heard once fully. Some things only return when they realize you've stopped waiting. The email subject line didn't even try to pretend warmth. Family photo. June 10th. The body was brief. Judith wants to update the summer album. It wouldn't be complete without you. Let me know. Elaine. No salutation, no closing. I didn't open it right away. It stayed unread for 4 hours, tucked between a grocery coupon and a bill reminder. When I finally clicked, it wasn't curiosity. It was completion, like turning the last page of a book I didn't choose. The tea in my cup had cooled. A fine crack ran down one side, bisecting a pattern of faded blue vines. I used to drink from this mug every evening during my second trimester, tracing the worn ceramic with my thumb. It used to feel like comfort. Now it just reminded me how long I'd held things together without noticing the fracture. Rachel had called the day before. Her voice didn't carry gossip, only concern disguised as neutrality. Amber's gone from the clinic. Quiet departure. Brian left town. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. They found out about the ultrasound. She added slower. I didn't ask who found out. I already knew some lies carry their own gravity eventually. They collapse inward. Later that evening, Elaine's email arrived. The timing was too deliberate to be coincidence. Michael was working late. I sat alone on the couch with a blanket that still held the faint scent of lavender detergent, the one I used for baby clothes. A single sock rested in my lap. I hadn't finished folding the rest. A message from my father came the next morning. It's just a picture. Not a big deal. For your sister's sake. No greeting. No explanation. Just a request wrapped in minimization. The kind that makes your breath stop, not because it's cruel, but because it's hollow. On the table, I noticed an envelope had come unsealed. Inside an old holiday card I must have forgotten to put away. Amber front and center, standing by the fireplace in the cardigan I once gave her. Her hands rested gently on her midsection. Elaine stood behind her with a hand on each shoulder. They wore matching chains, gold with a tiny charm shaped like a crescent moon. I hadn't been invited that Christmas. The card read, "Warmest wishes, the Graysons." I flipped it over. No handwritten note, no acknowledgement of the absence. Michael stood in the hallway later that night as I thumbed through an album I hadn't touched in years. The spine creaked. One photo stopped me. A 10-year-old girl in a pale yellow dress, lips parted, as if caught mid-thought. Everyone else looked at the camera. Her gaze was just slightly off toward something someone not pictured. No one asked what she was looking at. Michael's voice from behind. You don't owe them anything. I didn't respond. The words weren't for answering. They were just an echo. In the kitchen drawer where I kept things that didn't belong elsewhere, I found the forget-me-not I'd pressed between napkins. I'd picked it the day after the ultrasound appointment alone along the trail near the park. Its edges had browned, but the center still held a hint of blue. I placed it next to the hospital wristband from week 24 and the appointment slip I'd never showed anyone. These weren't keepsakes. They were proof that I had remembered even when no one else did. Days passed. A new message blinked in my inbox. From Elaine, again. Would be lovely if you and Amber appeared together. Show we've moved forward. No apology. No reference to the theft. No confrontation with what had actually been done. Only a sentence asking me to make it look like everything had been resolved with one photograph. That morning, I ironed the corner of a note I'd scribbled for myself. During the second trimester, you are building something no one can erase. The ink had smudged slightly from a coffee ring. I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a robin's egg. I replied, once quietly, if a photo can undo silence, maybe it's better I'm not in it. There was no answer, just more stillness. In the nursery, the curtain swayed lightly. I'd hung it myself, white cotton, embroidered with tiny stars. On the wall I had taped index cards with name options. None started with A, none borrowed from family tradition. Under the glow of a soft lamp, I opened a fresh pack of sticky notes and wrote one word in block letters. Then another. Then a third. None of them were final, but they all belonged to her. Not to me. Not to the family tree. Just to her. I stood for a moment in front of the fridge. The ultrasound from week 32 was there. Her hand curled just beside her cheek. I had circled it once gently, like framing something sacred. I took a pen and wrote below the image, "Your name won't be in their photo, but it will be in the world." Then I turned away, not out of anger, not out of grief, only because there was nothing more to see behind me. I used to think growth had to be loud, announced, applauded, affirmed. But this time it came in quiet, like the way fabric softens after enough washes. The floor in the nursery had a spot where the varnish had faded. I sat beside it on a pillow legs, crossed painting a canvas with soft strokes of grey-blue. The colour reminded me of breath, just before speaking. I taped the edges to keep the lines clean even though no one would see. Beneath the first layer I had written her name in pencil, Hannah, just above the baseboard, and below it, "You do not have to make anyone proud. You only have to be born in truth." The room smelled of paint and dried citrus. A ceramic diffuser on the shelf released slow curls of rosemary and bergamot. I had arranged the drawers with small cotton socks, folded burp cloths, and one soft quilt I'd sewn by hand, patches of faded t-shirts, and pieces of an old curtain from my college apartment. Nothing matched, but none of it needed to. The prenatal yoga mat lay rolled in the corner, still faintly creased. I followed the breathing diagrams taped to the wall, charting out when to inhale, when to hold. I kept a blood pressure monitor by the window, not because I feared anything, but because I trusted no one else to track me. The checklist grew on its own diapers, bottles, swaddle wraps. I'd packed the hospital bag with 3 sets of newborn clothes and one for myself. All plain, all comfortable. I didn't ask for help. I didn't reject it, either. I just never opened the door. The last gift that arrived in the mail had no return address. A plush bunny with a pink satin bow and a card that read, "From someone who still hopes to be included." I left it in the box and set it on the porch table. The next morning it was damp with dew. I threw it out with the rest of the trash. Dr. Levine noticed something different at my next appointment. She adjusted the Doppler wand, glanced up, and paused. "You're lighter," she observed. I nodded once. "It's not just the weight," she added, holding my gaze. My hand rested on the curve of my belly, not as a shield, but as a center. "Because she's being born," I said. "And so am I." I waited until the nurse left before pulling out a folded note from my coat pocket. I handed it to the front desk receptionist on the way out, a formal request to keep my birth plan confidential. No notifications. No visitors without written permission. The woman glanced at it, then looked at me as if searching for someone behind my face. I didn't blink. Back home, I hung new curtains in the nursery, white linen hemmed with uneven stitching. The rod tilted slightly to the right. I didn't fix it. Not everything needed to be straight to hold things in place. Michael had offered to help, had even cleared his weekend. But I'd asked him to take that time for himself. "You already hold us both?" I'd written on a sticky note he found on the fridge. I kept the note he'd written me months ago, though. It was tucked into the baby book. "You don't owe anyone a performance." Only presence. Mom called again on Friday. Her voice low, measured. No tremble, no warmth. Your sister asked if she could come with me to the delivery, she said. It might help her heal. I pressed the speaker button and let the phone rest on the counter while I sliced lemon for tea. She wants to be part of this, Mom added. I think it could be good for everyone. I lifted the cup, watched the honey thread dissolve in the steam, and spoke with even breath. This birth is not a stage. She didn't respond. The line stayed open. I hung up without another word. That night, I sat by the window, knees drawn under a soft throw. Outside, the street lamp flickered once, then steadied. No buzz from my phone. No apologies. No explanations. Just a stillness that felt earned. The tea had gone lukewarm, but I sipped it anyway. The mug was chipped along the handle. It had been my grandmother's. I ran my thumb across the crack and thought of all the things we carry, even when they're no longer whole. A neighbor's cat climbed onto the porch rail, stared at me through the glass, then leapt away. I didn't follow its movement. I just watched the spot it had left empty. My back ached. The baby shifted, nudging a rib. I adjusted the pillow beneath me and reached for the notebook beside the lamp. I wrote her name again, slower this time, then underlined it once. Hannah. No middle name, no borrowed legacy, just a clean syllable, unweighted. I folded the page and slid it into the pocket of my robe. If she ever asked me why no one else held her first, I would tell her it wasn't because no one was there. It was because I had waited long enough to hold someone fully, and I no longer needed anyone to witness that, to make it real. Some things don't end with confrontation. They end when we no longer need to explain why we left. The envelope had no return address. Cream paper matte, finish edges slightly worn from my fingers, tracing it too many times before sealing. Inside was a letter, short written in black ink on unlined paper. The strokes of each word curved softly, deliberately, as if spoken only once and never repeated. Amber. You wore this pregnancy like a borrowed coat. It fit for a while, but it was never yours to keep. I need it back now, not in anger, not in revenge, just in truth. Audrey. I folded it, once tucked in the ultrasound copy she had once stolen, restored now, but not without its bruises. On the back of the photo I'd written the expected date and a name, Hannah Grace Bennett. The ink bled slightly through the paper, the letters curling at the edges from the pressure of my pen. Not because I pressed hard, but because I meant it. The walk to the post office took 13 minutes. I counted only because I wanted to forget them later. I didn't use Express. No tracking. No delivery confirmation. Letting go meant not needing to watch. Back home, I sat at my desk and changed the profile photo on my account. Not to an image of Hannah, not to a quote or a milestone. Just a dried lavender stem on a wooden windowsill. The same lavender Amber and I used to mock at gift shops for looking like brittle sadness. Now it smelled like silence that knew its own shape. I clicked save. The cupboard above the refrigerator held a thick binder titled Grayson Family Record. Leather spine, gold lettering. Inside neatly printed charts, generations traced in loops of ink, birthdays marked with stars, anniversaries underlined. My name was third in the second column on the right. I didn't hesitate. I turned to the page. The corner had a fold from where I once dog-eared it to mark an upcoming reunion. I tore it out clean, not rushed. The sound of the paper separating felt louder than it was. The trash bin wasn't full, but I placed the page at the bottom beneath the coffee grounds and a used tea bag. I didn't crumple it, let it lie flat. There was no music playing. I didn't need background. I needed the stillness to echo the decision. Later, I stood in the nursery, not to adjust anything, not to clean, just to observe. The mobile above the crib spun slightly, moved by air I couldn't feel. A wooden elephant tapped against a felt moon. I touched the edge of the crib. The varnish hadn't dried evenly in one corner. My finger found the rough patch and stayed there. No part of me wanted a reply, no phone call, no explanation, no apology wrapped in performance. If they responded at all, it would likely sound like, "You didn't have to go this far." Or worse, "You made this about you again." And if they didn't respond, that would be a response too. One I could live with. Michael hadn't asked what I was writing when he walked past my desk earlier. He saw the envelope paused, then kissed the top of my head without speaking. His way of understanding without requiring narration. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A wind chime at the neighbor's porch rang once and stopped. A dog barked once, not again. I reached for the chipped ceramic mug, the one I never used for guests. It held steeped lemon balm and honey. No spoon. I let the leaves float. The smell reminded me of the garden behind our childhood house. Amber used to crush the mint leaves in her palms just to make her fingers smell fresh. I'd always found that wasteful. Now I understood it wasn't about the utility, just the need to feel something linger. I pulled open the drawer where I'd stored old cards. Birthdays, Christmas, those hollow thinking of you notes from relatives who never really called. I didn't sort them. I took the entire stack and set it in the donation bag near the door. Somewhere in the pile I knew was the card Amber had given me after my engagement. A pale pink one with a silver ribbon and words she hadn't written herself. The ribbon had come undone long ago. I didn't look for it. Before bed, I opened a small notebook, the kind with a brown craft paper cover. On the first page I wrote, "Hannah will not inherit silence. She will learn presence." I closed it. On the dresser, I placed a small wooden box, one I hadn't opened since the day I left home. Inside 2 rings, a photo strip from college, and a dry flower petal I no longer remembered the origin of. I added the binder tab I had torn earlier. Then I closed the lid. I didn't lock it. I just didn't plan to open it again. I no longer measure the quiet by its emptiness, but by how little it asks of me. The kettle gave off a soft hiss before boiling, and I didn't move to silence it. The linen cloth on the table had a new crease from being folded the wrong way, one I didn't bother to smooth. The light through the window made it look like parchment thin and full of stories it never needed to speak. The mug I chose this morning had a tiny chip along the rim, like a mouth that had forgotten how to frown. I filled it halfway with chamomile tea, let the bag steep until the water deepened to the color of old honey. No lemon, no sugar. I drank it plain now, the way you learn to love things without decoration. The photo frame beside the fruit bowl had gathered a thin line of dust at the bottom edge. I wiped it clean with my sleeve. The image inside hadn't changed, grainy monochrome, curved like a moon. A profile barely formed, still unnamed to the world beyond this kitchen. On the refrigerator door, the small notepad had 3 lines written in different pens. Buy diapers. Call Rachel back. Fold the baby clothes. None of them were urgent, but all of them were mine. That was enough. I heard Michael's steps before I saw him. Not heavy, not rushed, just familiar. He didn't greet me. He didn't need to. His hand rested on my shoulder longer than necessary, warm and quiet. He refilled the kettle without asking, without waiting for an answer. I wasn't offering. We sat across from each other, cups between us. He watched the steam rise, then followed it with his eyes, as if it could lead him somewhere better than words. The television stayed off. No music, no radio, just the soft tick of the wall clock and the occasional clink of his spoon against ceramic. He never said, "Are you okay?" He never said, "You look tired." He never tried to name the silence, and so it stayed intact, unrushed. I reached for the drawer near the sink, pulled it open slowly. Tucked inside, under utility bills and doctor's appointment cards, was a letter I hadn't touched in weeks. Amber's handwriting on the front. It hadn't been dramatic. It hadn't asked forgiveness. Only 2 lines. If I knew how to give it back without breaking you, I would. I didn't mean to steal you with it. I folded it again. Not to reread, not to relive, only to store it finally among the files labeled Hannah. Documents. Let it sit beside insurance forms and vaccination charts, reduced now to paperweight, no longer the center of anything. A breeze touched the curtain. I stood and opened the window further. The outside air was clean, unremarkable. The small white onesie I'd washed the night before swung lightly on the clothesline, its sleeves lifted like tiny arms reaching toward nothing in particular. The phone vibrated once, a single ring. I turned to look. Mom calling. It didn't flash again. I didn't silence it. I didn't decline. I let it pass. Somewhere in the background, a bird called out. Not a melody, not something poetic. Just a sound that meant morning had arrived and would stay whether I acknowledged it or not. I poured another half cup of tea. The spoon on the saucer left a faint circle of moisture, perfectly round, like a soft reminder that nothing touches us without leaving a trace. I didn't wipe it. Then from the drawer under the table, I pulled out the new journal. The cover was plain craft paper, the spine stitched rather than glued. No design. Just blank pages that didn't expect anything from me. On the first line, I wrote slowly, "You didn't come to fix me. You came so I could choose the life that didn't ask to be proven." I let the pen rest after that. No paragraph followed, no elaboration. It didn't need to be a letter or a lesson, just a note that said, "I am here. I am not broken. I am not waiting." Michael had gotten up. The kettle was off. The cups were mostly full again. Outside, a truck passed playing faint music from an open window. I couldn't tell the song. I didn't try to catch it. The words weren't mine. The beat wasn't meant for this room. The wooden floor beneath the table had a new scuff mark, something the chair must have made last night. I traced it lightly with my toe. It didn't come off. I didn't mind. The onesie on the line drifted slightly to the left. No one would see it. No one needed to. It didn't declare anything. It just was. My hand returned to the tea, still warm, still plain, still mine.